Okay, hi Bradley. This might be a little bit weird, but this is a much better way, I think, to explain drafts. So, form. Both advertisements use form in two different ways to get their message across. What you're saying here is that each advertisement uses a different form to get their message across to their target audience. Okay? The Nokia phone advertisement is from the 1980s, iPhone 5 for recent times, are advertising similar brands. Well, they're not similar brands, Bradley. One is Nokia and one is Apple. They're actually in competition with each other. So what you're saying is they are advertising similar products. Now you need to be careful. Are they targeting different target audiences? I'm not so sure that they are, but we'll talk about that in more detail when you come on to your target audience. Yes, they're years apart, and it's shown how advertising has changed over the years, but it's also showing how technology has changed over the years. Because what I think you need to understand, Bradley, is that this advertisement, the Nokia, this was the height of technology when it was published. This is the iPhone 5 of the 1980s. And I think you're slightly missing that point as I read through more of your analysis. However, editing, etc., is much better here. Purpose. Yep, they both want to persuade their audience to purchase a phone. But it's not just any old phone, is it, Bradley? It's a Nokia or it is an iPhone 5. So be specific here. And yes, both phones are the latest mobile phones of the era or time. Okay? First advertisement informs it with the fact. Now, you're missing the point here. The first advertisement informs its target audience with the fact of the advertisements being published 30 years apart. No. The first advertisement, you need to analyze the first advertisement as if you are the audience of the 1980s, Bradley. So you need to change this. While the phone has changed designs, with the same target of ensuring the reader is drawn immediately to the phone. Yes. So what you're saying is, it's not very clear. Both advertisements share a similar purpose, which is to persuade people to purchase that brand of phone. And now how are they doing this? Through creating an emotional connection between the audience and the product. Make sure that you're going back through that PowerPoint that is on sector. Now, aimed towards adults and seniors. What do you mean by seniors? Old age pensioners? No, because remember, it's the iPhone 5 of the 1980s. So you can't just say adults. Do you think it's aimed more towards men or women? Think about the colors. I think it's aimed more to a more masculine audience, but again, you need to look at the social context of the time, which is that mobile phones like this were not used at the time in the same way that we use phones now. They were used for business. So you would see businessmen walking along with these enormous great contraptions strapped over their shoulders. But it's not the kind of thing that you or I would have been strapping to our shoulders. That price, $595 at the time, is probably well over about $1,000 or even more in today's terms. You can Google it. So you need to be clear that you understand a little bit more about the purpose. This section is too long. You're well over your word count, so you need to cut this down. But you need to be, if you're going to mention target audience, be a bit more specific than adults and seniors. So we're going to cross that out anyway. And yes, you've already said that they're aiming to sell the product of a mobile phone. So let's start cutting. Yeah, they were beginning to be introduced in 1980s. But did it have a high demand? As I've just said, when the first iPhones came out, were they in high demand? It was people with a lot of money and disposable income who could afford them, or people were getting them for business. It's only now that they're in high demand because every 7-year-old upwards wants a mobile phone. Now this, you've got it wrong. It doesn't produce an emotional impact as instead of talking to someone you can purchase. That's not the emotional impact, so I've cut that out. Now, iPhone ad aimed towards children and young adults. Why do you think it's aimed towards children, Bradley? I'm not sure that it is. There are no cartoon characters. There are no bright colours. So I can't see any evidence here that it's aimed at children and young adults. I think actually Apple is one of those. These iPhones have a very broad target audience because they are gender neutral and because they are easily accessible by all generations. I think the point about Apple is that it's supposed to be very intuitive. It's easy to set up Apple phones and iPads. That's why children and adults can use them. So you need to revisit what you're saying here. Who use fashion mobiles as minimal people use iPhones, whereas a Nokia phone, I don't know what that means. So you're going to need to just edit this, cut that out. Provokes an emotional response. Sense of loving a phone is easy. That is what many people do. Can you just make sure that when you're actually quoting from the advertisement that you do it correctly, Bradley? Because that's not correct. It is trying to provoke an emotional response, but you need to see which emotional response. Go back to the PowerPoint and the hard copy that I printed out for you. Which value or desire is it promoting? It's not health or environment, but is it perhaps the idea of popularity or being included in a sort of specific group? The fact that so many people do you want to be part of the majority? Do you want to be part of the cool gang? So is it attitude? Is it popularity, i.e. everybody else does, so why aren't you? So you need to rethink what you're saying here. Drags the viewer. I don't think that's a very good word. I think you want to say grabs the viewer's attention and creates a strong desire to buy the phone. Each of it targets people. Again, don't just say people. Adults, young adults with a higher income. Yes, probably. Yep, so that's okay. Target audience. Okay, we've talked a little bit about that. You have to be careful. You have to look at this. Young adults and middle-aged. It wasn't young adults. Kids, I was around in the I was a teenager in the 80s and none of us thought about mobile phones. So you need to say that it would be business people. These were corporate phones that were used by corporations and companies and businesses because nobody had them. So what was the point in having one if none of your friends had one? So usually they were used by businesses to enable communication between companies and their employees. And yes, it was very expensive. Kids couldn't afford it in the day, yes, but kids weren't interested in them either. So I've crossed that out. Now, you're getting confused here. To symbolize the phone was produced years ago. You have to remember, Bradley, there's no symbolic intention here. The advertisement was created years ago at the time that phone was the height of the latest technology. So either cut that out and just focus on your target audience. Google Nokia and the name of the phone, target audience, because I think you'd find Nokia Mobira and you'd find out a little bit more. You probably should have done that already. Original colors of black and white. Yes, but you don't need to talk about that in your target audience. Okay, children, teen and young adults, and adults not being able to use it as well. Again, I think you've misunderstood the whole point of Apple and iPhones, so you need to revisit that. Google iPhone 5 target audience, and there's so much on the internet. But I think it is a very broad target audience. It's not gender specific and it's not really age specific. However, it does look sophisticated. So you need to think about that. Again, you're well over your word count, so I'd probably just cut all this out. Because, as you'll find out later, you haven't done any visual elements. Social context, what do you mean by respectful? Respected brand? Too many orders the night it's released, fine, but why? Why? How has Apple created this insane desire in consumers that we have to have the latest version? They've done it by constantly making us feel that the next version is better than ours, and we're going to be missing out if we don't keep updating. So you need to work out which desire they are appealing to. It's kind of attitude, I think. It's creating this attitude in consumers that you need to have the latest one or you're going to be missing out. Now, I don't think you need this because you're going to be talking about that, or you actually probably should talk about this, the fact that you know it's an online advertisement because it's got an interactive icon. This should be up in form. So I think you need to take this and take it to where the title of form, okay? Okay, just a few things here. Apple ad, poor editing. Apple needs a capital, ad is 1D, so you need to keep correcting that all the way through. Uses imagery of how many people love the phone. There's not an image there, Bradley, of thousands of people loving the phone. So it's using persuasive language to provoke an emotional response, yes, to buy the product. Now, you've got this a little bit wrong. The Nokia mobile phone is a phone brand that has existed for many. It produces simple and cheap phones to the audiences. Well, it does now, but at the time, it was the cutting edge. Apple phones didn't exist then. You should have done a little bit of research. Apple did not produce mobile phones until the 2000s. So Nokia was actually way ahead. With not much to the advertisement, the technology was not good and black and white was used. You're misunderstanding. They had colour in the 1980s, Bradley. They've used black and white for a specific reason, and you'll come on to that in visual elements. There is plenty to the advertisement. So you need to get over this idea that it looks dated to you because you're looking at it from 2018. You have to think about how much less sophisticated the world was in the 1980s. We had big hair and shoulder pads and listened to Duran Duran, okay? It was a lot less sophisticated. What do you mean they share the same story? Purpose, but you've already said this. So you need to just read and edit this. Show your understanding of the huge advantage in technology, Bradley. Which is shown in the advertisements. And the Nokia, believe it or not, was the latest phone of the time. And it is sophisticated advertising for the time. However, what these advertisements show is how advertising and technology has become incredibly